6th at 6 p.m. In Charlotte Memorial Hall. Kim, can you call a roll?
Councilmember Gagliotti?
Here.
Councilmember Lintel?
Here.
Councilmember Getzel?
Here.
Vice Mayor Clark?
Here.
Mayor Kerr?
Here.
I was gonna say.
All right, we're going to move on to general public comment. Does anyone have a comment dealing with any matter not on the agenda? We're limiting those to 3 minutes and we will not receive council action. Any public comment? All right, we'll move on to number 3, old business, where we're going to receive a housing element update from Ashley.
Hello, City Council. Thanks for having me today. Ashley Quackenbush with Denise Duffy and Associates. I've been working on your housing element. I'm just gonna All right. All right. So I'm just gonna give you guys a quick overview of what has happened in the last couple of months since we've last spoken with you. We've submitted the draft housing element to the California Department of Housing and Community Development. We submitted the housing element on September 18th for a 60-day review period. We've been working really closely with HCD. They've been really great about working with us and doing a really iterative process with them throughout the month of October to get the document up to state law and up to what HCD is really looking for. Technically, they have 60 days to review the housing element, and they will provide a compliance letter by November 15th. Hopefully we get it earlier. In a parallel process, we've also drafted the initial study negative declaration for the housing element that has circulated for a 30-day public review. That 30-day public review will be done on November 22nd. Both of these documents, the draft housing element and the draft initial study, are online for public comment. So that's where we are right now.
Where online?
On Del Rey Oaks. And I believe we have a track changes version on there as well, that I believe you all have as well. So I'm just going to quickly go over some of the edits that we've made. There was some edits to the document. Not too many were super substantial though. In chapter 1, you'll see we made some additions and some clarifications to our public input process and public review process, including all the public meetings we had, public comment, council comment, planning commission comment. So we added some more information in there. Chapter 2, there's a lot of analysis in chapter 2. HCD wanted to see also an analysis of the population of developmentally disabled residents within the city by age. So we added that. Chapter 3, we, under AB 2634, a new state law, we need to quantify the amount of extremely low income housing. So we added that number using a 50% method. We took 50% of the very low and low, which is 11 units, and we took 50% of that and we came out with 4 units. So that's your extremely low income housing need now. We also worked with HCD to edit the site inventory analysis. HCD was really only interested in the sites that Del Rey Oaks is looking at for development in the near future and that don't have constraints such as water constraints or governmental constraints. So we kind of removed all those extra sites that we had in there and we moved them back to an appendix, Appendix B. And we really focused on Site 1 and Site 1A within Fort Ord to meet your regional housing need allocation. So you'll just see some clarification and some more analysis on those sites, Sites 1 and 1A. Chapter 4, we had just various clarifications on the city's zoning code, what types of approvals are required for people wanting to develop within these zones, and then as well as some analysis on the fees that the city or the regional fees that come into play for development versus the costs associated within the city. These questions, I believe HCD was really trying to get at that Delray Oaks doesn't really have governmental constraints to development, such as cost or strange things in their zoning code, like requiring a use for permit for something that's already a permitted use, or things like that. So that's the kind of clarifications we were making for HCD in that chapter 4. Chapter 5 and 6 didn't have any edits, and then chapter 7 had some edits. We added at the beginning of chapter 7 a quantified objectives summary table. This essentially broke down your regional housing need allocation number and how you're gonna meet it. And in Delray Oaks, we're meeting it by new construction. We're not rehabilitating units, we're not doing conservation, anything like that. It's all under new construction. So you'll see a lot of zeros in that table, but that's just how they like to see it. Now to the updates in the programs. These are the more substantial updates. Program 1A, we took that clarifications that we made in the site inventory analysis in chapter 3, and we moved that to program 1A, identifying site 1A as the preferred site to meet the city's regional housing need allocation for low income, and site 1 as the option for moderate. We also had to update the goals under the program for rezoning of these sites. Program A4, we added a program A4 in compliance with AB 2162. It requires supportive housing to be allowed in multifamily and mixed zones by right. So, program B6, we identified that the city will go after at least one funding source for housing per year. I believe you have another item on your agenda later today for the SB2 grant, so something like that. We added compliance with SB 35 to program C1, which allows streamlined approvals to meet the regional housing need allocation in municipalities that haven't met that allocation. So streamlining approvals for development for communities that haven't met their regional housing need. I don't know of anyone who has met it. Not in the state of California. Let's see. Program D4 was another one that was really important to HCD. In this program, we identified that the city's C1 zone was adequate for emergency shelters, and we made a goal to update the zoning for the C1 zones to allow emergency shelters in those zones by right. And then lastly, we also added program D5, which amended the city's zoning ordinance to accommodate AB 101 along the same lines, allowing low barrier navigation centers by right in mixed use and non-residential zones permitted for multi-family uses. So those are kind of the high level edits that we made to the housing element. As I said, we should receive a letter from HCD by, November 15th. At that time, Delray Oaks the housing element will come back before the city council, and you will vote on certifying the initial study and adopting the housing element. And then we will submit the adopted housing element back to HCD. So that's kind of the process moving forward. And after that, we'll work on some of these rezoning programs will be one of the more higher priority items, as well as your next housing element, which will hit right away after 2019. So that is all I have for the council. If anybody has any questions?
Yes, can you clarify the housing element for 15th planning cycle and covers an 8-year period. Sounds like we're going already doing that second cycle, or it's rolled into this.
That's a very good question. The planning cycles are really confusing. But, so the 5th planning cycle is from December 31st, 2015 through December 31st, 2023. Since Delray Oaks does not have a compliant housing element and didn't adopt a housing element within the first 120 days of that planning cycle, they are subject to 4-year updates.
Okay.
So this is your first 4-year update within that 8-year cycle, and then you'll have another 4-year update within that 8-year cycle. Once you have 2 compliant 4-year updates in a row, you will go back onto the 8-year cycle. So hopefully we'll get this in before 2019, we'll get another one in before 2023, and then you will be on the 8-year cycle.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was actually, I didn't think about that, but so 6, we're gonna kick that off as soon, after next year, but we have until 2023 for us to submit.
So it's still within the 5th planning cycle. So it's your second 4-year
This one
update.
is, I'm saying the next one is 6, right?
The next one will be the 6th, yeah,
Right.
after 2023.
Well, after 2023.
Mm-hmm.
So what are we kicking off then immediately after we submit this?
The 4-year update.
For 5? The 4-year update for the first cycle 5.
For the second part of 5th, yeah.
Got it. All right, okay. So the neg deck then, can we just, I mean, there was a lot of effort put into this one, which we've not seen yet, but we'll review it. Will we just basically do a supplemental on that for the second 4-year?
A supplemental neg deck.
Or are we gonna start fresh and do a brand new neg deck?
You know, I'd have to ask Denise about the process for the initial study for that 4-year update. I mean,
Each one's a project, right? So that
each,
needs to be.
yeah. So I'm not sure if you could do, because the thing is that you're gonna update your zoning ordinance, and you're gonna make a lot of changes
Yeah.
by then just to be compliant. So it'll have to be assessed at the time.
Right. The IS will actually bring that out. I mean, I think that's the purpose of the IS, is to tease out just whether we need to do another full-blown neg deck. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so the initial study essentially is the document that looks at what level of environmental compliance you need to do.
Okay. Are ADUs considered new construction?
I'm not sure the answer to that. But the strategy is to develop those sites 1 and 1A, because as of right now, the constraint to we have constraints under developing ADUs, water constraints and things like that. So
Okay. And then emergency shelters, I mean, define that. What does that mean?
there's multiple different types of shelters
Yeah.
through HCD.
Yeah.
There's like transitional housing, there's emergency shelters, and then there's these low barrier navigation centers. So an emergency shelter, I don't have the definition off the top of my head, but it's more of like a nightly shelter where people can come in case of emergency. It's different than a transitional housing type situation, if that clarifies it any.
And the
At all.
onus is on the jurisdiction to create these, or just say that's where, if we have any, that's where they are?
Well, right now we have a program to rezone, so there is the potential that you could have an emergency shelter there. So the onus right now on you is to at least rezone for these emergency shelters by right.
And then the owner, everything in that area is all privately owned, so then it would be the private landowner would then, on their own, define an emergency shelter.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting. I spoke a lot with HCD, just trying to kind of, HCD is the state department.
Yeah.
And so trying to kind of paint the picture of Delray Oaks to them and,
Right.
saying, in there we don't have a homeless population and we're a very small community and there's all these shelters around. So I think there's probably opportunities for, being involved in shelters with other jurisdictions or something like that
Mhm.
moving forward. But I think your first step is really to get that zoned.
Okay.
That's really important.
That's helpful, thank you very much.
I just had another good question. In regards to that, would the, like, Old Town Hall, could that be considered an emergency shelter? Do you have restrooms right by, or?
So we were talking about that earlier, that right now, since you don't have anything zoned as an emergency shelter, and, like, under law right now, the town hall would be your shelter. If someone were to need an emergency shelter, that's where it would.
How do they mean it?
So my understanding of this is that what we're doing is setting the conditions for where homeless shelters can be located.
Right.
Until we do, the entire city is fair game,
Yeah.
right, by state law. And so, but that doesn't mean that City Hall or Old Town Hall would necessarily become the shelter. It just means that if someone wanted to come into the city, to your point, generally with a piece of private property, and develop a homeless shelter, the city could not deny, on the basis of that use, that request.
Let's go back to public comment. Seeing no public comment, those public comments come back to the council. Any last questions?
Commend you guys, I mean, this was a heck of a lift. Yeah.
So I just, again, I want to thank Denise Duffy and Associates, but especially Ashley for the hard work getting us here. The reason we wanted to put this on the agenda tonight was to give the council and the public the opportunity to get a summary of some of the changes that have happened since the initial submittal, so that at your November 26th council meeting, having received a letter from the state, you can consider adoption. And that'll be a real milestone for the city, and we're excited about it. So.
I have a couple of questions. Who is our Spanish speaking translator? So it identifies in the document that we have one. So I want to make sure, do we actually have one?
That's just the information I've been provided.
Okay.
The
so-
several.
Yeah.
I think it's, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. And can you, for everyone, explain what Site 1 and what Site 1A is?
Yeah, so Site 1 and Site 1A are in Fort Ord. If you look at, we have, what is the,
Can I take that?
yeah,
So site one is the 230-acre parcel north of South Boundary Road, which the city is seeking to currently develop. It's a large parcel. The site 1A is the much smaller parcel, approximately 18 acres south of South Boundary Road, adjacent to the Regional Parks District on one side and City of Monterey on the other.
and they're shown in Figure 4.
And I want to be absolutely clear that this document indicates that we're going to do our reading numbers on only on Site 1A?
No, so the document says that you're gonna rezone. You're gonna rezone site 1A. That's kind of the first step. So I'm not sure what you mean by do the RENA numbers, but it's, the document is saying you're gonna rezone that site 1A, and that your goal is to develop for the very low and low on that site. So yeah, you have to identify a site, for the RENA numbers. And that is the site that we have identified as being the site to, but I mean, I think if another development were to come around and, you know, do that, that would still count.
On the second one.
HCD saw this site 1A as, they preferred this site, for a variety of reasons, and like I said, they are a state agency, and so they don't totally understand all the intricacies of this community in general, and so that's why we really wanted to keep site 1 in there too. They didn't really want us to keep site 1 in there necessarily, so we have both in there now.
And so the other sites are taken out of consideration?
They're not taken out of consideration, but I mean, we identified in the land inventory analysis that they weren't viable options. So,
John, any other questions?
No, I think that was a good discussion.
I think that was, those are my basic points. Any other? All right.
great, thank you.
For coming and explaining that for us. All right, we're gonna move on to new business. Our first one is a resolution 2019-24 for finding and declaring an emergency pursuant to Article X111C, Section 2, Subdivision E of the California Constitution necessitating submission of transactions and use tax for general purposes to the voter at the special election on Tuesday, March 3, 2020.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That is the issue before you, is to adopt that resolution. The city's been making good strides to balance its budget over the past several years. However, as the public knows and council is keenly aware, we continue to carry a significant debt burden, accruing interest at an unacceptably high rate. Our cannabis revenue is a significant part of our general fund. It continues to be a dynamic and uncertain part of the state economy as well as our own. With Ford going away, we're losing caretaker funds and we'll be incurring some additional costs in the near term as a result, as well as our unfunded PERS liabilities for city retirement pensions and city healthcare costs for retirees. For all of those reasons, staff is recommending that the council declare the emergency to allow for a ballot measure to be placed on March 3rd election. I'm happy to answer.
I don't have any questions, but I think it's justifiable.
Yeah. Agreed.
I agree. I mean, we just don't know what the future brings, and we need to save and plan for the future.
It's absolutely necessary. There's a valuable for us.
Any public comments?
Karen Harris, resident, Zeta Road. I understand why we would want to have a sales tax increase or to continue it forward, but for the residents, it was supposed to be temporary. And to continue extending it seems like we're not doing a good job at managing our city. And I would hate to have thought that we hired new employees assuming and having the assumption that the people would accept an extended tax increase. And I don't like that one bit. And there's a lot of people that don't appreciate having an extended sales tax because it unfairly hits people that are low income. And it could also deter businesses from coming here. I think we should live within our means, and if we did want to have it temporarily, I think maybe 1 year, but I don't think it should be indefinite. Thank you.
Any other public comments? Okay, come back to the council. Any last questions?
How do we compare as far as our tax rates to Monday, Wednesday?
Amongst the highest in the county, 9.25%.
Okay, and Monterey is now considering,
Monterey is considering an increase in their sales tax also in the March.
There's also, the county is considering, and any jurisdiction is limited to 10%. So they could come in and raise the tax to that, and then we wouldn't be able to. There's a couple of things that I just want to make clear about this. This is a add-on tax, so all of it comes back to the city. And we're talking about $600,000. And I agree that, there were years there where we were just being asked, I remember property taxes and things like that. But I do think we're at a point where it's not an increase, it is an extension. And I think we are at a point where we're very tenuous with the canvas. I mean, it's been really good to us, there's no doubt about it. But I think we need some solid, consistent funding coming in. The $600,000 is a lot when you're talking about, $4.5 million budget total. So, yes.
I just want to add that all the other cities have a lot of TOT tax from other businesses, and we are extremely limited, if we get this development going up here with the tax dollars that come into our city. I think it's gone quite smoothly. I completely understand what you were saying, Karen. I was always against the tax, in fact, before I always wanted to sunset it. And there's nothing that can say, that we can't say, can we reverse it at any time in the future if we want to? Of course. So, I think we need to do this. I think it's, we've got to remain solvent as a city. I want to remain Building Oaks. I don't want to, split Monterey Seaside, which was always talked about because we didn't have the money. And I think that we've been extremely conservative with our money. We have a lot of we've got South Boundary Road that we're dealing with. We have so much in the pot to deal with. I don't think we're hiring anybody new just to let somebody else have less to do in their jobs. I think that we're doing what we can to move forward as a city and have future tax dollars that are stable, and when time comes, might be after I'm long gone, but, we can remove this tax. Hopefully there'll be other council members that would agree with something like that if we have plenty of tax dollars coming in. For now, I think we need to continue.
Yes, I think it's necessary, especially in light of the fact of Flora going away, we're going to be losing the income that we have been receiving from Flora. So our income is going to be decreasing even if we do vote this in, put it on the ballot, and it's up to the citizens to make the decision. But so many of the residents, they want different things to be done in the city, and we still have this huge debt that we're paying interest on. And I think that we need to keep it ongoing until we can at least get out of debt and be above board. And I do appreciate your feelings, Karen. And I know taxes are hard for me, but I see the necessity of them in order to maintain the above board Building Oaks and to keep progressing as we are.
I'd like to add, caveat or continue on with what Pat was saying as far as Flora sunsetting know what's gonna happen to parts of FOR's responsibilities. And when that happens, there's fire protection, there's habitat protection, there's all other kinds of things that's gonna come onto the city. I think we need to plan for the future and take that into consideration. We are very lucky. We're trying to do our due diligence as far as the employees' retirement benefits, but unfortunately, my personal feeling is that the state management of that retirement fund has been very, very lacking, and unfortunately, we're going to have to pick up the burden.
Yeah, to that point, I was gonna say that the living within your means comment was taken to heart. The issue that I've seen in this short time that I've been in public service and looking at a lot of these public budgets is that the goalposts are moving, and it's happening at the state level. You know, we used to have redevelopment abilities to capture money from redevelopment. We had all these smaller jurisdictions, or any jurisdiction, had these abilities to basically generate revenues. It's all been taken away, and it's all been moved and centralized into the state. And then the state, specifically with retirement, just changed its return value by almost a full point, which meant that the demand for the retirement obligations didn't change, but who pays for it did, and that comes back to us. So while I absolutely agree with you and take your point to heart, the living within your means, it's difficult when the goalposts are moving.
I just want to mention that Delrose is hardly flashy for their money. You know, we will have another year-end balance, and the year-end balance last year was used very conservatively to start putting away into savings, emergency savings. We started to do our retirement a little bit, and also paying off one of our loans. We have a long ways to go. I'm not so worried about Fora itself. What I'm worried about is the inevitable downturn, right? How is that going to affect all of us individually, all of us shopping at Safeway? You know, that's where the taxes generated. And we're very tenuous right now. And so that's why I support this. So, one last point before we vote. The emergency is a word that is needed to be able to get this on the March ballot. So, I remember hearing that Monterey also was called an emergency, and I'm like, oh my God. It's a word. So. Any other comments?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve resolution 2019-04.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, it's voted unanimously. New business B, now, tied to that is, consider resolution 219-25, a resolution to place a measure to extend indefinitely the existing 1% transaction use tax on the ballot to be submitted to voters at the March 3, 2020 election.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Nothing more to add here other than to highlight that it's $600,000 of revenue per year, and this ballot measure will solidify that revenue stream. There was a minor change to the ordinance language on page 7 of 12. There are copies available to the public in red strike through, and council has copies of it. As you'll see on the top paragraph, there were words struck out. The purpose of those words being struck out is there's a limit to the number of words that can go in that paragraph that goes on the actual ballot, and we were over. So we trimmed out those words, and now we're good. And so I'm happy to answer any questions. I would take this opportunity, since I have a mic, to just to stress to Karen and others, of all the responsibilities that we have here at City Hall, I take none more seriously than fiscal stewardship. And we've worked pretty darn hard to try to do right by every penny we get from all of you. And I think our employees continue to be, they do great work. They're amongst the lowest compensated in the county. Our retirement formula is 2%, rather than 3%, rather than more generous retirement formula. I would never in a million years come before this council and recommend a change to that. I think that's why we are as stable as we are, even considering our challenges. And we continue to look at every opportunity to try to reduce costs and leverage revenue sources that aren't tax increases. And so we'll remain committed to that.
Any other comments, questions? Comments, questions?
Karen Harris, resident of Round, I'd just like to reiterate what I mentioned before about not having an indefinite tax. And I'd like that we mentioned that perhaps it could be eliminated in the future. And I completely appreciate all the good work that the city employees do here. They go above and beyond. And I'm not hopeful nobody ever thought that I didn't think that. But I think we can maybe do some more about grant funding, neighborhood improvement grants, and if there's some other way the citizens can help get those funds coming into the city, I'd like to do that. Encourage businesses to come in, improve our tax base in other ways. Thank you.
Any other public comments? Okay, those public comments will come back to the council. Any last minute?
So move.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Last piece of business is C, consider a resolution 2019-26, a resolution authorizing application for and receipt of SB2 planning grant program funds.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The resolution before you is required in order for the city to apply for SB2 grant funds. The grant in question is $165,000 based on our city size, and it can be used for planning in support of housing programs in the city. And the staff report incorrectly said that it can be used only for the housing element. That's incorrect. It's much broader than that. Denise Duffy and Associates are preparing the application that we will submit. Council approves the resolution tonight that will become part of the application packet. The application actually contains what is a work program for much of the work that's contained in the housing element. As an example, a zoning ordinance amendment, a ADU ordinance update, a density bonus ordinance period, and so on. Those are spelled out in the application packet with estimated costs to do them and the timeframes. And if we were to get this $165,000 grant, it would go a long way towards funding much of the required work.
Questions, comments?
Yeah, no doubt.
Can't wait. All right, let's go on to the public comment. All right, public comment closed here. I just had a couple of clarifications as well. When I looked into this, I asked our city manager for a little clarification. So this is one-time funding, and I just want to read the eligible activities so everyone's really clear on what we can use this for. Updates to general plans, community plans, specific plans, local planning related to implementation of sustainable community strategies or local coastal plans, updates to zoning ordinance. Going back to the housing element we just did, all of our zoning ordinances are out of compliance, so we have 9 to do. Environmental analysis that eliminate the need for project-specific review. process improvements that expedite local planning and permits. That's all I have.
Just one more point on this. We thought we were ineligible for this grant because our housing element is not up to date. And I learned at the California League of Cities Conference in Long Beach that because we are making as much progress as we're making, that they might give us the grant funds. So it's exciting that we might get it. It's not a sure thing by any means, but it'll be fantastic.
And we have plans on
I'd like to make a motion that we approve
And second.
resolution 2019-26.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. It's unanimously. So now, any public comment having to do with the closed session, having to do with certain litigation personnel and deliver real property negotiations. No public comment, we're going to go into closed session, so you're welcome to, come back after we're through with the results. Otherwise, have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Mayor. With regard to the closed session item, an update was provided to the council